Hey guys, Heavy on 45 here. Now, I know that it's been a while, but, well, I did a video last Sunday, but this kind of video I haven't did in a while. Um, Back in June, I talked about my party that I had and my story of how I was their DM and how things relatively went. It wasn't bad. Um, but as a story, as I said before, back in June, I know it's August. I skipped a whole month without giving y'all a story to go with this. But I figured now was a good time, All my frustrations of other stuff has already came through, so let me go ahead and do this. Um Being DM is very difficult because as a DM, you have to have other people to play with you. This isn't like I could go online and get everybody connected. Like I said before, people had family, friends, well, girlfriends and boyfriends, not just, you know, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends so I can hang out with you. But they had relationships that they were in. They had jobs that changed how we were able to do. So it became a juggling skill to be able to get everybody together so that we could play a game. Um, and because I didn't want to juggle, I went ahead and talked to Ninja Tank 25 and talked him into trying to do a solo campaign because I knew I could definitely get him, and so that's what we did. I am constantly developing more and more story to come with the game. So I was still building parts of the world, and I had just got through watching the anime Magi on Netflix. And if you've ever seen Magi, they have these towers there, and if you're able to make through these towers, you get this what is believed to be an ultimate weapon, a weapon that uh no one else be able to find. Like, you couldn't find anything anywhere else. These were like high-end artifacts that had like mystical spirits that if you um learned how to control them were real effective against different villains and some heroes. But the thing was that I didn't understand how to make a spirit. But it didn't matter about making a spirit for these. What I did decide to do though was make the towers. I created several different towers, and I was like, how am I gonna base all these towers? And so each one of the towers were built based off of people who, well, the idea of each tower was connected to a deity in Pathfinder. So now I never said this before, but Cael Ninja Tank 25's character was a worshiper of um I just had her name in my head. Saren Ray. I think that's the right name. So since he is a worshiper of Saren Ray as a cleric, he decided to go to her tower. And I figured that her favorite, because since it's his deity, he decided to go with her favorite weapon. So her favorite weapon was the main weapon at the top of the tower. And I'm like, okay, I can't make this easy for him. He went here alone. It has to be something challenging, had to be something that he really has to fight. And I'm like, okay. Because another rule, if you ever decide to be a DM for a Pathfinder campaign that's for a solo person, whatever level that person is not that level when they're alone. So, if you have a person that is, let's say, for Cael's sake, a level 10 character, and you put this level 10 character into a dungeon by themselves, everything that they go against is not going to be on a level 10 level. That character technically goes down 4 levels. That's the rule for the game. The average encounter in Pathfinder is supposed to be done by a group of 4 people. For every person you have less than that, the challenge rating of the group goes down by 1. But because if you go with that logic, technically the Cael should only, since Cael was level 10, he should be able to be considered a level 7, which means that he would be able to fight anything that was around 7 to possibly 10 to 11, might be pushing it. You know, about that level, he should be bleeding, all halfway dead, and stuff like that. That's by logic, that's what it said. But in actuality, whenever you're trying to adjust low, he's actually considered a level 6, which still means the same thing that I said before. 10 to 11 should possibly kill him. A 9 is a difficult thing. A 6 to 7 should be hard, relatively easy. 8 to 9 have some difficulty. 10 to 11, he should almost be dead. So, but I was like, okay, I'm DM, I'm going to do this, let's do it. So I take him in here. I'm like, okay, he's all by himself. I have to make sure that the monsters are not stupid, because I didn't want to cheapen his game, but I have to make sure they're a challenge. So that's what I try to do. I make them a challenge. They come up to fight him, and all of a sudden, he kills them. And I don't mean like he just all of a sudden brings out his sword and one swipes all of them. He barely pulled his weapon out, because if I remember correctly, his weapon is a scimitar because of his deity. He barely pulled out her weapon. What he did was play mind games with me, because everything I put him up against, I'm like, okay, it's a pretty good fight for him. And so he proceeds to summon, because most people, and it's not because the DM, most DMs don't want to deal with this, I'll be honest with you. Summoned monsters are a bane to deity. I mean, for not deities, for DMs, because it creates another creature that you have to put into the game. So if you have, like, for me, when it was the original party, a group of 8 people, well, 7 to 8 people that are trying to play the game, and amongst those 7 to 8 people, somebody summons a monster. Well, now you have 9, which doesn't technically go to the CR, because technically they're summoned by a spell. Just like another rule, if you're a DM, if someone summons a monster or a gang of monsters, like let's say they use the spell Gate, which opens up a gate that allows monsters of a certain level come out every 10 minutes, but it's the same type of monster from a different plane. My favorite one was using Gate to bring in earth elementals. So you start off with small earth elementals, 10 minutes later medium earth elementals, 10 minutes later after that large earth elementals, 10 minutes after that huge elementals, 10 minutes after that gargantuan. I think I skipped one. Large, huge. Yeah, I think gargantuan was the next one. So yeah, and I love doing it, but it creates more monsters for you to have to try and figure out. So now it's not that they get but when someone summons it, it doesn't give the party experience because they killed that monster. It's just that if you kill the summoner, it does. So Cael has summoned a divine, a divine lion. So this is a lion that is good aligned. So every attack he had does good damage. I think his size category went up. This thing was like, it wasn't stronger than Cael, but it kind of made to where Cael was able to let it do all the frontward offense, and he just kept casting spells from the back. So he basically almost went through the whole tower without any problems. I was There was one time where he had a little bit of, and it was like his lion was getting hit and he was getting hit, and it was the one time where he was close to being down on health. But the problem with saying that he's down on health, he's a freaking cleric. He can just heal himself back to being normal. So after this actual tough part of the fight, he actually was able to do it with no problem. And I remember one of the fights that he had to go through, because I was like, okay, in one room he runs into a labyrinth and he fights a minotaur. Now, minotaurs aren't suckers, to no extent. And I think that was the fight that the divine lion had a little bit of problem with, because it hit him good, it hit the lion good, and it started to go for Cael, and Cael had got a couple hits put onto him too. Because I'm like, okay, this minotaur is not stupid, he's going to go ahead and do what he has to do. And even though I said that he won, you know, Cael beat every single thing that was in the tower. And like I said, this was not. I tried to do it somewhat like Acho Maki, but I tried to give it a lot of, um, basically like a real test of force, because this is supposed to be something difficult that, like, he's already higher than the average person, because this is how I lost it. Not every Just because you have a lot of people in the game does not mean that everybody in the game has like super levels. So let's say you have a basic soldier in the game was a level 5. They're level 10, so they're pretty well, they're not well known, but their name has been heard. So you know who they are if you hear their name. Like, what's your name? Yeah, I'm Cael. I've heard of a Cael. You're Cael the Dwarf. I've heard of some of your exploits. Of course. You start getting renowned. You're well known. Like, in my world, a level 10 person, you're about as good as a captain of the guard. If there's someone higher, they might be a general or a commander. But they're not gonna be like level 15 or anything like that. They're somewhere between 10 and 10 and probably 13 for me. Not saying that they're weak, but it's just that you spend a lot of time in the city where you're just fighting, basic crimes, muggings, people being killed. You do basic like police type stuff. While adventurers go out and like, hey, I want to kill the biggest monster I can find. So that's what they do. You know, what would the average like guard fight? Werewolves are trying to attack people in town. Uh, Wild animals that are too big to be in that area, unless it kills them, and then they go into groups of dealing with them. So yeah, so and this is a lot of me explaining for the most part, but Cael was able to beat the whole thing, and so I gave him a weapon that I felt was close to what you would find Magi. Now, it wasn't a uh spirit inside of that controlled it, but at the same time there was a personality in it. And yes, that means I gave him a intelligent scimitar. It was a scimitar that basically it had a mind of its own. It could I'm trying to remember all the abilities it could do. It had a couple of it had its own spells that it could cast. It could resurrect him once a day, I want to say, or something like that. Um, he doesn't know about that part yet. I don't think. I told him that, but it is a part of it. No, I think I did, but that's not the problem. But he got this intelligent weapon because he was able to defeat this tower. And like I said, I didn't make it easy for him because, like I said, the average person would not have been able to beat this tower. The average guard would not have been able to do this. So I did give him a reward for what I thought for the work that he was able to do. Now, this brings me to a different comment when it comes to being a DM. As a DM, you also have to think about your character's funds. Now, there's a nice little thing if you ever look inside of a Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder book that talks about something called wealth by level. And so you have to, it's usually good to make sure that your characters are if you're a deal, that your characters usually keep a number close to what you have when it comes to their equipment. Their equipment should be the equivalent of the amount that they say on the list that your people should have. So with what I gave Ninja Tank 25, his character, since it's an artifact, he is probably over his wealth by level, which means that if I ever play with him again, I might not be giving him anything for a while. But at the same time, if he gets into a group with other people, I can't exactly not give them stuff because he has something. And I'll talk about that some other time because that's another story dealing with Javo and the whole, like I said, wealth by level. But I'm gonna leave it here. I hope y'all understood my kind of ranting that I just did, and I'll check you later.